Dr. Jazz.
Thanks, Mike, for taking the time.
Dr. Jazz.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
Well, followed you around since 2008 when Small Spaces came out. I was on Fresh Sound back then as well, so I kind of,
Whoa,
was
blast from the past.
yeah, we'll go there today. I will ask you some things, but
Cool.
yeah, I mean, otherwise I'll just jump in and I listen to Everywhen We Go, and it's a killing record, man. It's
Thank you.
it's like a movie soundtrack almost, like when I listen to it, and I don't know, Jim Keltner, this vibe that he has kind of reminds me of that Gone with the Train, that Frizzell did album with Victor Krauss, the trio. You know that one?
Yeah, he plays drums on that.
Yeah. And he had so much, and Mike Watt and I as well. And like, first of all, how did you compose the music for this one? I mean, it's like, in a way, it's like you, when I listen to your previous work, yes, it's also different. It's more cinematic in a way. I don't know how you hear it, but like, how did this one come about?
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, I don't know. Sometimes, I guess I have a couple of different ways of writing. Like sometimes the song just kind of maybe like a melody, or I get a chord idea or a rhythm idea, or words or something. They just, those like really magic moments where it all just comes, and you hope you don't forget it, or you figure it out, or you record it or something. And then sometimes it's a little bit more like involved, just kind of thinking about, I want to write a song about blank, and then how am I going to do that? Or maybe sometimes like, oh, I'm working on this thing that's kind of difficult for me to do, like just musically, or to think about musically or whatever. So for me, it's been helpful to like write a song that is kind of like my version of whatever that thing is supposed to be, but I think for this record, Everywhen We Go, the latest one, Everywhen We Go, that was one of the songs that kind of just the melody kind of comes to you.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And you just get it down, and then you kind of you just kind of tweak it, so that was something. And that one, like I wrote it for these guys, like thinking about these guys and they're playing, Mike and Jim. And the last track on the record, Measure of a Life, that actually comes from the first record that the three of us did, Wall of Flowers, from 2019, I think. We did a bunch of other music from that session that exists on my hard drive here.
Okay.
And one of the things that I sort of improvised solo piece, it was just a solo improvised thing, came out as that song. And actually the intro version on this record is from that original session, where I was just sort of like diddling around with that melody on my friend's guitar. And so then I just sort of expanded it into, how can we all play it together, and sort of utilize what those guys do best. And then a few other pieces on the record were just improvised, which is a lot of what we did on the last record, the Wall of Flowers record too. We would just sort of improvise and record it, and then I would kind of take some of that home and transcribe what Jim and Mike were playing, or think about what I was doing, and then write more material to kind of overdub that, to sort of tie the room together a little bit. So yeah. Oh, and there's one more like composed piece on there called Fake Break. That was something I wanted to have Mike play a melody for something on there, so we did that. And then Yank It Out, of course, is Watt's tune, so that was just, he brought that in for us.
Yeah.
So there's a variety of types of music on there. The way it was kind of conceived was all over the map.
Yeah. Did you play gigs with this trio a lot? I mean, or are you planning to still, or how does the music sound? Oh, no gigs, really?
No.
Oh, wow.
No.
Oh, interesting. And not even planned, or? Okay.
No,
Okay, interesting. I mean,
no, I have another band
yeah,
with Mike called
yeah,
MSSV, and
yeah,
that's with Stephen Hodges plays drums in that band. But
yeah,
that's a different project, different records.
yeah. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, would be fun to hear this trio live because I think you would totally sound different, I guess, because stretching it out and, going different ways, I guess.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe because well, some of the stuff we recorded, like I said, like we just improvised it in
Yeah,
the moment. So I feel like it kind of has that quality to it, sort of etched into the records anyways.
yeah,
I mean, of course, everything's different every day, so who knows what you end up with.
yeah. How much did the guitar effects or for you do play? How big of a role? I mean, when you write a tune, do you usually write like, without amplified, or you always write with effects, or when you practice, things come out when you noodle on a delay button or tremolo or whatever?
Yeah, I don't really write with effects, I guess, in mind.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Maybe sometimes I think like, oh, it'd be cool to have a textural thing from this thing that I do on that. But if I'm just writing a song, yeah, I just kind of think of the melody and I think of what
Yeah,
happens rhythmically and harmonically, and then later I might think about like, oh, it'd be cool if I had this extra little element of sound in it.
yeah,
You know, I think I have I mean I have like tons of effects. I love how you can manipulate sound with the electric guitar, and I love using them. And I've gotten to work on some with some companies, and I think it's a really cool thing about guitar, that we have this sort of avenue open to us that a lot of other instruments have
yeah.
also kind of like tried to get into, with over the years in different ways. And I think that that's really great. But I just find that I tend not to really. I mean, I practice with them so that I can think of them as part of the instrument and use them as part of the instrument, as part of my sound. But for whatever reason, I don't really go to them until it's time to get ready for the gig or get ready for the recording or something.
Oh, okay.
I tend to, and a lot of times I try to see how many different sounds I can just get out of the actual like physical guitar itself with
Yeah, yeah.
little maybe preparations or different techniques and stuff. I think that's really fun to do. Um, everything that I'm trying to do, like sound wise, whether it's from an effect or a technique or something, just kind of has to have a place in what the end result is going to be. So, but I don't find that I start with it usually, and that's
Hmm.
not for any reason other than just I haven't had any ideas like that, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, interesting. Yeah, like when I hear your sound, it's like such a it's so hard, but like you created, I think, your own sound, which in a guitar world nowadays it's quite heavy. Uh, Yet I still hear, there's touch of Frizzell, I guess. I don't know. I hear Jeff Beck sometimes when I hear you play. I don't know why, but or someone like that. But like, who were your, let's say, guitar heroes when you were younger, or still are? I don't know. Or like, who got you excited
Yeah,
to
yeah,
be
still are for sure.
a guitarist for playing improvised music? I mean,
Well, it's funny because like a lot of people put the Frizzell thing on me and when they do like reviews or whatever, and that's great. I mean, Bill's
yeah,
great player. I got to meet him once only, and of course I've listened to him, but I never tried to really like. I don't really think of him or his sound as like a big thing for me, like it is for some people. I think it's out there in the ether, and it's also in the
yeah,
frame of reference of everybody else too, But it's always kind of funny, flattering, but it's just a funny thing for me. But yeah, I guess more so, I always think about like Tom Verlaine to a big degree, David Torn to a
mm,
big degree,
okay.
Jeff Beck for sure, Nels Klein.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I mean, there's Sonny Chirac for
Oh
sure, Henry
man, yeah.
Kaiser, um, Fred Frith, Derek Bailey. Uh, I'm forgetting like 1,000 guitarists, but but sort of, I think that's kind of casts a wide net, I guess, you know.
Was there a guitar moment for you? Like when you said like you heard a jazz guitarist, or like especially for jazz improv, what, do you remember like a moment when you said like, okay, shit, I really want to discover that path, or when you were younger, I guess, a teenager, or
like as far as wanting to play guitar?
yeah, like especially, I mean, jazz. I remember like my guitar teacher for classical, he gave me the Road to You record by Pat Metheny Group, and I was like,
Oh
ah,
yeah, the live one. Yeah, that's
yeah,
a good
yeah.
one.
And I remember I just didn't listen first. I made a cassette recording. I was like, yeah, I'll listen to it later. Then I put play on it. I was like, man, what is this? And I started to investigate like whatever we do jazz or, but did you have a moment like that, or?
Um, yeah, yeah, there's actually a couple, like just guitar in general. My dad plays guitar, so
Oh, okay.
I think just wanting to play guitar was just kind of like from seeing him play guitar, and like he would play things for me and I would like be fascinated by the sounds he was making and stuff. So that was the first thing. And so there were guitars around the house that I could kind of like, pick up. Actually, my arch top right there is one of his old ones that I
Wow,
sold.
that's
So
beautiful.
I've been playing that guitar since I was, 12 years old or something.
Wow.
Um, and then he also, he had music and stuff like records around the house. And so, I didn't really have like my own records when I was little. So I would kind of just go through whatever. But he had this Jeff Beck record called Wired,
Oh
which I
man.
think is like the first one that he plays the Strat on, maybe. So he's got the whammy bar thing going. That was one of the first things that I heard that was like, wow, it really like turned me on to like, how do you do that? Like what is going on with
That's
these
the one where he
sounds?
does the Mingus tune, right?
And
On
so
that one,
that's the
right?
next thing I was going to
Yeah,
say. And
right.
so
Yeah,
he
yeah,
does
okay.
Goodbye Pork Pie Hat on
Yeah,
there, the
exactly.
Mingus tune. So it's like this total rock record, it's like, it's the sound of like rock guitar basically for me starts with that record because that was one of the first things I heard. And the whammy bar is kind of part of that, which is something that I've incorporated into the way I play. Also a big David Torn influence
Yeah.
there for me. But anyways, on Wired, he plays the Mingus tune, Goodbye Pork Pie Hat. And I remember like listening to that song, thinking like it was kind of different from everything else on the record. And this is like a 12-inch record. So you can look at the back of the record and you can read about it and you can see, oh, this song is written not by Jeff Beck or anybody on the record. It's written by this guy, Charles Mingus. Who's Charles Mingus? Okay. Then I go to the record store and I go, oh, I have to go into the jazz section. Okay, well, I'll do that. I'll check this out. And I think I got like the CD of Mingus. Was the first Mingus record I got. And then from there, I kind of like, just reading liner notes and stuff. Okay, now that this guy John Coltrane comes up a lot, and I think the first Coltrane record I got was one of those Live at the Vanguard things, and they called it Impressions, and it had like
Yeah.
India on there and After the Rain. So it's kind of later Coltrane. And then I heard about Miles from reading that, and so I got In a Silent Way. And I just happened like these just happened to be the records I would get. It wasn't like, oh, I got to start at the beginning with whatever, the first Miles Davis record. It was just like I'd buy the one that had a cool title or the one that had a cool cover. And they just happened to be these ones that were sort of, maybe with the Miles one, it was like, okay, John McLaughlin was on there.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, maybe kind of there's a guitar player, so I can relate to that. But I kind of got into the jazz world through Jeff Beck playing the Mingus tune. And then I kind of ended up in this sort of not quite fusion, thankfully, I think records, but that sort of like that sort of early 60s era where things are getting to be more avant-garde and kind of electric, but not full on fuse yet. There's still like these really like mysterious elements of things happening. And so I feel like that is kind of that whole sort of timeline there for me is a big thing that sort of like formed my musical idea in a way, from that angle. And actually, if we're talking about like eureka moments, there's two other ones that I should mention also. And these are later. One of them is I'm now like in high school and I'm kind of like playing guitar a lot, and I don't know how this happened, but my sister, who's great, and in so many ways, but she's not really like a musician. And I only mention that because like I don't know how she would know about this record. And when I was in high school, like for Christmas, she got me a CD one year, and it was a CD called "What Means Solid Traveler" by this guy, David Torn, this guitar player. And it had the most trippy cover. It had a picture of him with like all this like body art on his hand, like a snake hand or whatever on the back. And he had the Klein guitar, so the guitar looked all out, and the cover was like really trippy to look at, you know. And then the music was like mind blowing. I didn't even know music could be like these things, these sounds together, you know. And the way he was kind of using guitar for a lot of different textures.
Yeah.
And I don't even mean like electronic. I mean like just, you know, you could hear that he's like playing different parts of the guitar to make these sort of percussive sounds. And there's some vocals, some like wordless vocal things, or some actual word vocals on there. And then of course the sort of live sampling.
Yeah.
I guess looping, but not the way not like the
I know what you mean. Yeah.
build a band kind of solo. You know, the sort of the textural kind of stuff. It was just like, it just really like turned me around and like, wow, this is really speaking to me, and I have to figure out a way to kind of incorporate this stuff in my playing. So that was sort of the beginning of that thing for me too, sort of like the live sampling, manipulation, improvising with electronics. That for me comes from that record, What Means Solid Traveler. And I think I asked her about it once, and she was like, she went into like a Strawberries or something and asked the guy working there for like the weirdest guitar record he had. And so he was like, I've got just the record, and he got this one. And so whatever made her do that, and whoever that guy was, you know, totally changed my life.
That's cool.
You know, yeah, really, really crazy. And then the second one was in college. A friend of mine made me a tape of a record by Mike Watt called Contemplating the Engine Room. Sorry.
Oh, that one, I don't know.
Senior moment there. Yeah, Contemplating the Engine Room. And this is Watt's first kind of opera. And it's sort of this long form. The whole album sort of tells the story of his friend D. Boone kind of passing on, and his relationship with his dad, and his feelings and all this stuff. And this album came to me at a time where I was kind of like in music school thinking like, I like all these different types of music, you know, like I'm learning like jazz in college, but my world is not that small musically, and there's got to be a way where I can make a personal kind of music that incorporates all the different things that I love, but not have it sound like this cookie cutter thing. Like, you know, you get a record, and you're like, here's the reggae tune, and now here we're going to do jazz.
That did it. Yeah.
Here's my country song. And like, that's so lame, you know. Like, I wanted to think about how do I make a music that is like an original sort of sound that incorporates all these things that I love, but in a really honest way that's not like a pandering sort of thing. And I didn't know what that was, or if you could do it, or what that meant for me or whatever, but I was just thinking about it a lot. And when I heard that record, Contemplating the Engine Room, you know, I heard that record, this is it, you know, because that record from start to finish, every track has like a totally different sort of emotional vibe. And it incorporates all kinds of different elements of all sorts of different music, but it sounds like a band. It sounds like a band that's making this original music. And all the songs are so like emotionally intense, like the heart is on the sleeve, and there's just nothing held back on that record. And it came to me at a time where I felt like, oh, they've done it. It can be done. And then I felt like I could do it too from listening to that, you know?
Yeah. How did you then hook up with Mike? I mean, since in a way he's one of your heroes, let's put it like that. But
it's bizarre because that album is that Watt album is Watt with Nels Cline and Stephen Hodges, and Stephen plays drums in MSSV, and I got to know Nels a little bit, and then MSSV did a
you did the Nels album, that's
and then also the David Torn thing, I got to play on his last ECM record, Son of Goldfinger. He added me and Ryan Ferreira as guitarists to this string quartet. So yeah, I mean, looking on that stuff, it's really strange, you know, I don't know. Because I didn't really ever like, I mean, I don't know. I don't really think of myself as like a go-getter per se. Like, I guess, I mean, I work hard at what I believe in, but I'm also kind of like a slacker about some things. Like there are people, we know people they're always out there like working it and like,
Yeah.
you know, putting themselves in your face and stuff. And that that always kind of was like it's like too hard of a sell for me to get behind in a way.
I know what
I
you
like
mean.
when
Yeah.
things happen kind of organically. So, but I think it means that the pace of things maybe is a little slower for me. But anyways, I hooked up with Mike. There's another guy who's really important. This friend of mine, Chris Schlar, who I met in maybe in 2014 or 2013. We'd kind of been aware of each other through different friends for a while, but we didn't meet until 2014 or so. When he was on tour doing it for a solo record called Making the Saint, and he played in Brooklyn, and I was still living in New York City, and I went to see a show, and we ended up kind of hitting it off and talking for a while. And so he's not only a great songwriter and guitar player and singer. He has a great band called Psychic Temple. But he also is like a whiz in the recording studio. And so he was starting his own studio in Long Beach, California called Big Ego Studio. And he was going to start a record label to go along with that. And so he asked if I wanted to do a record for him.
Oh, okay.
And I was on Fresh Sound at the time, like you. And I had done 4 records for them. The 3 with the quartet, and then the 4th one with the
Billy and Jerome, right? Tone.
Yeah, the Spectre trio with
That's beautiful.
Jerome Harris, Billy Mintz. Thanks. Yeah, I was really proud of that record. And I was gonna do a 5th record for Geordie for Fresh Sound. When and I had this whole idea about this, which I'd never done, but at that point, Chris asked me if I'd do a record, and I said, well, yeah, I would like to do a record, but with you, because I like doing stuff with friends, you know. But I wanted to do something different. At the time, I said I want to do something I've never done, which is make a record with people I don't know.
Okay.
You know, because all the Fresh Sound records, these were like people for the most part that I considered my friends, you know. And I always thought if you were going to have a band, I always thought every band was just like friends that played music. Like I thought this like into my 30s, you know, like every band you've heard of, like, oh yeah, these guys are friends from like high school, I guess. You know, Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, okay, sure. Rock bands, yeah.
They didn't, you know. Everything. Like, I don't know why I thought that. I think back to my dad, he had like a band, like a wedding band, and I think they were like, they'd known each other forever. And there are some bands like that have come up together like as kids. So I guess I'd heard those stories, and I just thought like, yeah, it makes sense. Like if you're going to make really impactful music, you probably have to have that kind of really intimate relationship, like you've known this person for your whole life. Otherwise you're going to make a record that sounds like somebody trying to make a record with like some all-stars, and it's going to just be this flat, like dumb sounding, you know, records that we heard like that.
Oh man.
Yeah. It's obviously like a bunch of hires, and you know, yeah, it sounds fine. So what, you know, it's not going to be one of those things that lives with you as like an important thing, at least for me, you know. I'm talking about myself, but anyways, what were we talking about?
Chris.
Oh yeah. So I've been thinking about this idea, and back to David Torn. He was doing the mastering for the Spectre album, the last Fresh Sound record I did with Jerome Harris and Billy Mintz. And I was up at his pad while he was doing the mastering, kind of hanging out and trying to secretly learn something, standing behind him, you know. And I think at one point we were waiting for something to bounce or whatever, and I had asked him about his first record, which was a big deal for me too, Cloud About Mercury.
Yeah, Mercury. Yeah, that's a beautiful one. Oof.
Yeah, with Tony Levin and Bruford, and
that's a beautiful record too.
Man, yeah, really another touchstone. And I remember I forget exactly what it was, but I asked him like, yeah, it must have been, yeah, like it must have been crazy that you knew these guys your whole life or whatever, because I just assumed like, oh, it's a great record, they're like childhood friends, not thinking like, you know, Bruford's like a UK guy, upstate New York. So I don't know, I just didn't put the pieces together. And he tells me, well, you know, I cold called all those guys, I didn't know any of them, or something like that. Like he wrote Bruford a letter and like mailed it off, and then Bruford called him like 2 weeks later when
that's cool
over there, you know. And I was like dumbfounded, you know. Look, I'm like in my 30s, you know, you'd think I would have known by now, but he's telling me this, and I'm like, wait, you didn't know those guys at all? How did the record turn out so good? You know. And so he told me that, and I really started thinking about this idea, like, well, okay, so now, all right, I know that it's possible for somebody at least to make a great record with people that they didn't know since they were kids. Okay, wow, this is really interesting. So then I wanted to think about that. I wanted to think about trying them. And in my mind, I was like, well, who would I ask that would be, basically, who do I want to hear play together? Not, you know, whether I play or not is not really that important to me. Who do I want to hear play together, though, that hasn't? And I was like, yeah, I think it's weird that Mike and Jim haven't played together, because I hear a lot of similarities in the way that they approach music as rhythm section players, and also sort of as people that evolve the way they play over the course of the song, or the things that the way I feel they approach the idea of the beat, or something, or the way they support the artist they're with. Or I guess you know, some people kind of see it like they're sort of in these different worlds, but I never really thought about it that way, because they were both in my world of what I listened to. That it's sort of, I thought it was weird they'd never played together. So Chris asked me, what would you like to do? And I said, well, I would only want to do this because probably it would mean that I wouldn't make another record for Fresh Sound at that point. And Jordy was always like so supportive and like such a great dude to me. And I you know, I still consider him a friend and everything. And you know, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to even start thinking about making my own music without him giving me the opportunity to do that, you know. So I'm like really indebted to him. But so I said, well, for this to be worth it, I'd have to try to do something I wouldn't be able to do with him, and something I've never tried before, because it's going to be kind of an experiment. And so I told him this whole thing I went over with him, and I was like, yeah, well, we should do Mike Watt and Jim Keltner. And we kind of like just laughed about it for like a year and a half. Like, yeah, good one. You know, how are we going to do that? But it turns out that Chris had done some work with Watt for some projects, so he knew him. And then Chris had another friend, Danny Frankel, great drummer, percussionist, who put Chris in touch with Jim, and they were able to kind of make all the connections and stuff. And the stars aligned, and we had one day together in the studio, and we figured out what to do, and that ended up being the Wall of Flowers record. So that's the story. Interesting.
How did you hook up with Thorn? You just called him for the Spectre album, or?
No, actually, it was over an amp, sort of fittingly enough. You know, I was living in New York. This has got to be maybe 2011, 2012, something like that. And maybe 10, I don't know. But I was kind of like, I always felt like I could never get a good sound playing, you know. And in my mind, I was like, you know, I feel like when I don't plug into the amp, I feel like I play pretty good. Like I like the sound of like an electric guitar not plugged in, and when I'm playing it, I'm like, I think I get a good sound on that. But then the problem is I have to plug into something, you know, and then it sounds terrible. So, and it wasn't just that I could hear better when I was playing. It was like it felt like I couldn't get a good feel out of an amp, and I didn't know what to do. Yeah, I tried all these different amps and stuff, and I don't know. It's just such a complicated, mystical kind of connection thing, especially at that point. And so I didn't know what to do. So there was like online, there was like these demos of this amp maker out in California named Steve Fryette, and he was making this amp, which is now an amp that exists. It's called the Ether amp. But he was kind of making it, and so he was like posting these things online about like the amp, and he was talking about the design process of the amp, about how he's kind of improvising his way through it, and it was reflective of his ideas of music. And I guess in hindsight, it's kind of this high language about stuff, but well earned. And it kind of spoke to me like, oh, this is maybe a different approach to something, and it's like a way that you can think about the other half of the instrument of electric guitar as a way to kind of bond it together and have them work together. And just the way he was talking about an amp kind of spoke to me. And so I think I wrote him an email, and I was like, hey, I don't think I can buy this amp ever, maybe, but I just told him I'm a musician and I'm having trouble with an amp, and I think the way you're talking about it really speaks to me. And I mean, this guy runs like a whole company in California, but he wrote back to me. He was like, oh, hey, nice to meet you. Yeah, that sounds like we're on the same page with some things. And he was like, the prototype of the amp is with David up in not far from you, upstate. So I gave him your number, and maybe you can check it out. And so then Torn called me a couple days later or something, and he screened me on the phone to make sure I wasn't like an axe murderer or something, and then he invited me up to check it out. And so I think I rented a car and drove up there, and I just to sort of see what this thing was about, and to see if there was any hope for me in being able to get a sound out of the guitar with an amp. And he showed me some really cool things about how to sort of make the instruments work better together. And he's such a generous guy. And even that first day meeting, he was just really generous with his knowledge and his time. And just another like really person I'm really indebted to for sharing their knowledge with me. Really, there are people like that really sort of still inspire me, about like how I want to be as a human. Regardless of music or whatever, like everybody has, and I guess I'm kind of a moody person sometimes, but I always try to think about these people that were like really generous and kind with their knowledge and information, and just how much that means when you're kind of struggling through life and dealing with all the nonsense. These beacons of, oh, this is what it means to be like a real,
man. I don't know what you mean. It's funny.
And then we just kind of kept in touch and stuff.
It's funny you mentioned this. I did this interview with Jerome Harris, and I asked him about like why he's not leading bands anymore. Like I love those records from the 90s he did. Like I love that stuff.
Oh yeah.
And he was like, yeah, it said the same thing in a way. He was like, yeah, I'm a musician, I'm a composer, but I'm also, a husband, a father, and a human being. And I was like, man, that's so deep, yet so true. It's like, it's not all about the chords and the music. So it's funny. It's kind of the same, and you guys played obviously together. So that you mentioned this, that kind of.
Yeah, I love Jerome. He's such a great guy. He's another really super generous, hyper intelligent, like really funny, really like giving, generous, caring guy. Yeah, we did a couple little tours for the Spectre album with me and him and Billy that were like so fun, and just really, really beautiful guys.
Yeah, like Fresh Sound and Jordy and Jerome and Billy and New York scene so many times. And how did you enter? You played with Jason Rigby and Eivind and RJ on your first track. I love that record. I don't know why. I mean, I love Jason and Eivind. They're super amazing. But
they're the best thing about that record.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I say about my records always. No, but how did you enter the New York jazz scene? I'll put it like that. Or how was it for you when you came to New York and started to play? What were the first connections you made, and like getting gigs and tours and albums? And how did you hook up with Jordy actually for the Fresh Sound record? And I mean, all this New York.
Yeah, well, some of that I can answer real easy, but some of that I have no idea. Like, how did I mean, I kind of never felt like I was part of the New York City jazz scene in a way. But then sometimes I did, so I don't know. But I moved there because I wanted to play more. I was living in Western Massachusetts, and I moved up there. Well, I'm from Agawam, Massachusetts, Western Mass, and went to college at New Jersey at Rutgers to study with Ted Dunbar, who then
Oh wow,
passed
really?
away.
Oh
Yeah,
man.
Ted was a beautiful
Wow.
guy, but he passed away while I was there, and then Vic Juris came in and
Oof,
taught,
man,
and
how was that like?
I learned a lot from him. I know, and Stanley Cowell was there, who's
Wow.
really important sort of influence to me about being honest in your playing and stuff. And so I learned a lot from those guys that I felt like I could apply to like sort of a non-totally jazz centric musicality, because I think there are like universal truths in making interesting, daring music,
Yeah.
whether it's lessons from those people, regardless of like label or whatever. But so anyways, I felt like maybe I didn't know if I wanted to know if I had to play music. Um, I guess like I knew, the life of trying to be a musician is not like super easy all the
Yeah.
time. Um, would you agree?
Oh, I'm just silent rather.
Yeah. That says volumes.
More than words, yeah.
And so
Okay.
I kind of felt like, well, maybe I should find out if I really have to be doing this. Because sometimes I felt like I would go to gigs too, and like in my the universal knowledge that every early 20 something person has, where they know everything. Sometimes I would go to gigs and I would be like, I feel like this guy's not really giving it 110%, like he's kind of just coasting. I never want to be that kind of musician, like super super judgmental. In my mind I would say this, but I thought to myself, like, I never want to be seen as that. I never want somebody to see me play and think that I'm
Mhm.
coasting. That's
Yeah.
like the sin of sins. And so to myself, the way I could figure that out, I was like, well, maybe I should quit playing.
Mm.
It's like the most insane idea. Like, I love music so much that I should quit playing and see if I have to do it. Um, but at the time, it seemed like, yeah, I should do this. So I did. I kind of stopped playing for a while, and I moved up to Western Mass. This is right after 9/11, because I remember I was in Jersey
Mm.
City when that happened. And so it was kind of like a weird time for everybody, anyways, I guess. And I moved up there that winter. I moved back to Western Mass that winter, and I was just sort of working like some weird jobs, like delivering phone books and stuff, and not really playing, and actually purposefully trying not to play a lot. And then slowly, the short version of the story is, slowly I started playing again, but it wasn't like I was playing things that I felt like I had to do. Like, it wasn't
Mhm.
like, I've got to put my 3 hours in on the guitar and do all my scales and stuff today. It was just like, oh, I heard this Bob Dylan song on the radio and I want to learn how to play that. And so that's what I would do for that day or two. And then maybe I wouldn't play for a few days and I'd be comfortable with that. And that went on for a couple of years. And then finally I was like playing a
Wow.
lot more. And it was just a really natural kind of organic way to get back into the instrument. And I sort of felt like, okay, maybe this is the sign that I'm gonna be okay with doing this, because I feel like I don't have a choice. I really feel like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And then at that point, I moved back to New York City, and I was there for almost 15 years.
Wow. Long.
And when I first moved there, I knew a few people. I had friends like that were in the Boston scene that were in New York, and so I got in touch with them. And I had a few people I was in touch with from when I was in New Jersey, and I got in touch with them. And I just started going to gigs and meeting people and playing lots and lots of sessions.
Yeah.
And some people you get along with, some people you don't get along with, and you just do it. And then I was trying to keep my music, thinking about that idea of like, what is this music I'm trying to do, this personal thing, and trying to find people to play with that I could also think of as my friends, because I didn't think you could have a band if you weren't friends with the people. And so that just sort of happened. But the connection with Fresh Sound definitely is from a saxophonist named Jeremy Udine.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Jeremy's still really one of my greatest friends. And we've done a lot of things together over the years, but maybe not a lot of like recordings, but we've played in each other's bands at
I
times.
love his records. Torch Songs. That's his album, right? And Plainville and that stuff.
Yeah, with Monder, yeah. And
Yeah,
the
I
first
love that
Plainville,
stuff,
the first Plainville record I play on a little bit. I think I was doing like some ambient textural looping kind of stuff on that one. I forget what actually was on it, but that was, I think that was his first record for Fresh Sound, Plainville. Yeah. And I played on that. And then I'd already was aware of the Fresh Sound label from like those Chris Cheek records that everybody liked. And I think those Reed Anderson records, Vastness of Space,
man.
Maybe Our Generation was a big thing for with D'Angelo, Andrew. But when I was kind of like, maybe I had a bunch of music and I sort of had the beginning of like, oh, I have this idea of what I can do maybe. And I think maybe I was doing some gigs in like some little place like Tea Lounge or whatever. And I'd already been on Jeremy Udine's Plainville record come out already. So I think Jeremy just gave me like an address I could send a demo CD to of like a live gig of one of my bands or something. It was like 4 or 5 originals. And I wrote a little note to Jordy and said, hey, and I'm on Jeremy's record and I'm friends with so-and-so. It's also on your label or whatever. And, you just send these things off and okay. And then you figure you'll never hear anything and you go back to delivering phone. But this is why I think Jordy is like such a great, amazing kind of person in the world. I have a feeling that he listens to everything that he gets sent. Like I don't think you can say that for a lot of labels. I think it's word of mouth and connections, and I get that, and that is actually really sensible in a lot of ways. But I think he listens to everything from what I've understood, and that's like insane, but also really cool. And for whatever reason, he called me or wrote me an email or something. I guess there was email then. This is like 2005 or 4, maybe something like that. He said, let's do it. And he gave me a really good deal. I've never had to pay to make a record really, and he was really supportive, and I kept all my publishing. Just really, really nice guy, like to give me that opportunity. And then when the first one was done, Small Spaces, he was like, all right, let me know when you're ready for the next one. Like, okay, I guess I'll write some more music. And then the one after that, and then Spectre, I was like, I have another idea, Jordy, I want to do this other band. Maybe it's a little different. Would you let me try this? And he was like 100% like, yeah, anything. I trust you and your music. You've done a lot. And I'd met him a couple of times at that point and hung out and got along with him real well. And, because he would come to visit New York and people would go visit him and stuff. And then I started to go to LA a bunch around them too for different music things. And he would go to LA. I think he goes to LA more than New York or used to or whatever. And I met him. So we've had some good times hanging out, and it was just, it was great. It was a great opportunity to get to work on my music and have these goals to make these records, and it allowed me to kind of start to try to tour music a little bit and bring the music out into the world, which is what I've always wanted to do so much.
Did you tour with these groups in Europe, like? With those records?
No, not with these groups in Europe. But in the States. Yeah. Okay. Most of my touring's in the States. I've done like couple things in Europe, but just a duo thing, and then like friends of mine who lived over there brought me over. So all the touring's been in the States, which I think is actually, a lot of people tell me is kind of maybe the opposite of what usually happens for them.
Exactly.
But again, who knows? I don't ask too many questions. I go, okay, thank you. But like more than just the ability to make records, because I could never afford to make a record at that time, just the idea that this person who had this thing that I had looked up to sort of like gave me the confidence that the things I was doing was also, you know, should be allowed in the same room as this other stuff in my head. It was just like a really big confidence boost, you know.
Mhm.
And not even a confidence, it's not even like a confidence thing. It's just like, oh, someone else thinks that maybe there's some merit to what I'm trying to do. I'm not crazy. I'm not fully
Yeah.
crazy. It's someone else also, you know. And so that's just a really inspiring thing for me, because you know, like, you work so hard by yourself, sometimes you don't know like what else is going on. What do people really think when they hear it? You know, are people being honest, or I don't know,
Yeah.
maybe I have too much self-doubt or something,
No,
it
but
was
that
just,
makes complete sense. I know what you mean. Yeah.
yeah, it was just an important, he's an important guy for me too. So
Yeah. How did you do Spectre? I mean, like, you know, obviously those guys were the bands of friends that you did before, but Billion and Jerome are then kind of a little bit older than you. Like, how did you start playing with those two guys, or was that just like a
a
studio
little
session?
bit. No, just kidding. No, I think I had played, um, I think maybe I'd played some sessions with Billy,
Oh, okay.
or maybe I played some sessions with Jerome too. I don't feel like I cold called those guys, because that wouldn't have been on my radar, but I think I'd gotten to know them in some way and felt like we got along. And so then I asked them to do a gig in New York. Like, oh, I have some new music. Would you guys want to try it? But I'd already met them somehow, and I'd already known them.
Yeah.
You know, not like tight, but I knew them enough that I could call them and tell them I had this gig that paid like nothing. You know, would you do it? And for some reason they said yes, and it felt really good for kind of the newer, that type of music that I was writing that ended up on that record. It felt really good. And then, you know, I asked them to do a few more gigs, and they kept saying yes. And so, you know, and we got to hang out a little bit more at the gigs and stuff. So I felt like we were like, you know, they weren't like childhood buddies, but I was like, oh yeah, these guys are like friendly with me, and I
Yeah.
feel like I can talk to them and be honest about the music. And then we sort of joke around about all other kinds of stuff. And, you know, we got along on a lot of levels. And so at a certain point, I had hit up Jordy, and he said, go ahead and give it a shot. And then I asked them if they would do it, and they said yes. So we did that record at the Bunker, was the studio in Brooklyn, with Aaron Nevezi Engineering. That was a great place. I think we did Thieves and Secrets there also.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's a nice one.
It's a great studio. And so we did it there, and I asked Torn if he would master it, because I'd been hanging out with him a little bit, and he's got like golden ears, or one golden ear at least, and so he did that, and that was just a great sounding record, and I felt like I had made a lot of progress in my idea of my music at that point.
It's a trio.
And then, when the record
different...
came out, we did a West Coast tour, and we did an East Coast tour.
Oh wow, okay,
yeah,
beautiful. Yeah, I like. I don't know. I like it because it's like, you know, the previous records have saxophone, of course, and it's a different vibe. But here is just, you know, it's nice to hear a guitarist in this setting always. You know,
I was tired of hearing Rigby like play circles around me, you know, making me look bad.
Exactly.
Get out of here.
Hi, Jason. Kidding. After you know, you made kind of started playing gigs and touring, like what made you sick of New York, actually, that you moved out? What was the reason then?
Well, I mean, it's a hard place to live, you know.
It is, yeah.
You know, I wasn't sick of the great things about it.
Yeah, I'm kidding. Yeah,
but the reality of, like, for me at that point, it was like I never like made a lot of money at music, you know, especially not when I was living in New York, but I felt like I had to kind of keep working at a lot of things, like working like for money at like stuff I didn't necessarily love, so that I could continue to be able to afford living in New York, so that I could keep working, so that I could live in New York, you know.
Yeah.
Just on this hamster wheel of, like, you know, too much teaching, or too many odd jobs to fill in the rent money, or like gigs that, like, maybe I wouldn't have said yes to if I didn't need the extra $50 or, you know, and then at the end of the day, it was like it was cool that I was able to do all this stuff, and I got to meet a lot of people, and I got to learn a lot of things, and I don't wish that anything was different at all, because I'm still here today because of everything that happened before. But at a certain point, I was like, I'm not even like, I don't even have the energy to like go hear the shows that I really want to go to.
Yeah, that's why you were there also. I mean, usually.
Yeah, actually, I was reminded of this the other day. Like, this friend of mine who went to go see the band Television when they'd reunited, with Tom Verlaine, right? Like one of my hugest like all-time guitar heroes. Which, by the way, since he passed away recently, I've kind of been talking to a lot of people about this record he did. I think it was in the early 2000s, and the record is called Around.
Okay, I don't know it. I'll have to check it out. Okay.
Yeah, everybody I tell about, they're like, "Oh, I never heard this record." This is like one of the greatest albums ever.
Oh,
like, and he does a lot of sort of like open improvisatory stuff on there. Yeah, and I think like for me, like when that record kind of sums up my like relationship to his music. He has this really like sort of spacious sort of improvisatory thing, but he also has these like really interesting guitar parts and this like totally like iconoclastic attitude in the singing. Anyways, Around by Tom Verlaine.
Yeah, I have to check it out.
I'm surprised how many people don't know this album. But oh yeah, so anyway, so Television gotten back together, and they were doing a show in Central Park, like a free show or something, and my friend was like, "Oh, do you want to go to this show?" And I was like, yeah, but I have to work."
Yeah.
Like I couldn't miss the day of work when I was working at the museum because I was like short with rent money or something, and if I missed it, I was afraid they were gonna fire me, because maybe I'd already missed a few shifts for like doing gigs or whatever. But so and the end of my time living in New York, there was a lot more moments like that. These amazing things would happen. I'd be like, "Oh, I have to go do this gig right now. I can't go to this other thing, or I have to, dog sit for somebody tonight."
Yeah.
Just whatever, or just. And so I was thinking like, man, this is dumb, like I need to work on my music. I don't have any time or any energy to work on the things that I need to work on. What do I do? And I was thinking like, okay, I've been able to do a couple tours of my own music where we all made money. I able to make some records that are interesting, that kind of do okay. And I'm in some bands that I really like being in, that I think I can just come back for or whatever. So, the cost of living is so expensive. I was like, if I could just live somewhere cheaper, it'd probably cost the same thing to just travel a few times a year.
Definitely.
It'd probably be a wash, but then maybe I'd have more time. Right. And so that was what happened. So I had some friends in Knoxville, Tennessee. So I would visit couple of times, and I felt like, oh, this is actually a really cool town that does some really very awesome, interesting arts and music things. There's some really cool scenes there. Some of my newer greatest friends live there. So I ended up moving there, and I was there for about 6 years, met who's now my wife there. And yeah, I just kind of like this idea of not living in the same place that everybody else seems to live. A friend of mine told me about this quote from like George Lewis or Braxton or something. I forget who, but the idea was like, why does everybody have to live in the same place to make music together? Like why does everybody thinks the only real stuff happens here. Like that's insane. Like if you think about world history of anything, right? There's like amazing things happen all over the world, and like amazing people come from all these little places, and yeah, sure, maybe they move somewhere and they meet their scene and they kind of get connected with the things that allow them to blossom and stuff. But you have to be able to kind of find a way to serve that muse too. Sure. Happening, you've got to find a way to do that. So I figured I would just take the onus on myself to like maybe have to be a little bit more of a go-getter, to make sure that I could keep doing stuff, but finding a way where it was like an honest way to do it, And so Yeah, I just realized okay, maybe I've got to get my touring chops together a little bit more. Maybe I've got to get ahead of the ball just to sort of book gigs a little bit more than
Yeah,
I used to be, to plan out further in advance. Or and then also making sure that the things that I am going to put that effort into are really important to me. You know, maybe this band I was doing stuff in with somebody else, maybe that was cool because it was easy enough to do.
yeah,
But if I've got to plan a bunch of travel and learn all this music and spend all this time and the money's real weird, or maybe it's not fun for other reasons, maybe that's something that I can kind of just sort of let go so that I can shift my focus onto something a little bit more. So it was a lot of learning about that too.
that's important. Yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah. Did,
and
did you?
now I live in Gainesville, Florida. We moved about a year and a half ago.
Ah, you're in Florida now. Okay. Yeah,
Mhm.
but I wanted to ask you, how did you hook up with Jeff Coffin? And because
Oh yeah.
he's somewhere more like Tennessee or Nashville or something,
Yeah,
right?
he's in Nashville. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I was in Knoxville, I had some friends in Nashville. And I think actually it might have actually been through Jordan Pearlson, the drummer.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
I think, yeah, because he moved to Nashville, I think like the same week that I moved to Knoxville,
Really? Oh, wow.
Tennessee. Yeah, it was something really funny. And I think I called him and I was like, hey, I just moved to Tennessee. And he was like, whoa, so did I, you know, but different cities. And it's only like maybe 2 hours away. So I would go out there to visit him. Yeah, he got me on my first gig in Nashville was through Jordan. That's right. And I got to meet a lot of really, really great players, like the bassist Greg Bryant, who now lives
Yeah.
in New York. Um, Matt Endall, great pianist. John Estes, great player. I think bass player I met through him. Doug Mosher, great saxophonist who now
Hmm.
lives up in the Boston area. And anyways, and then I met Jeff through that scene too. Jonathan Wire is a great bassist. There's like so many great musicians in Nashville that are not, you know, outlaw
Yeah.
country.
Yeah. Yeah.
The stereotype among people and
Yeah. Yeah.
geography is like so bizarre. It's like so insane to me. Like especially now that I don't live in New York, but I still have a lot of friends in New York, and you know, I have a lot of friends in LA, but I don't live in these places. So I get hit with sort of like the sort of like subliminal geographical stereotype of my friends. And so I'm always kind of like the instigator pushing back against it. Like, you really think everybody in this state thinks the way that you think they do? You know, it's like so insane to me. But anyways, there's a
Yeah.
lot of great improvisers in Nashville. There's a great scene of improvised music in Nashville.
Oh,
And Jeff Coffin is like one of the biggest proponents of all kinds of music
yeah.
happening at once, you know, because again, he's got this really like deep worldview of music as kind of like a heavily societal element. And that means different things to different people coming from different places, but we all kind of share a common background. So why can't the music mix and find some interesting things? So we saw eye to eye on a lot of that kind of just sort of idealism of like a non-genre denominational
Yeah.
thing, I think maybe, and hit it off. And he's another guy that's like super generous with his knowledge and his experience and stuff. I've learned a lot from playing with him, and we've always had a lot of fun hanging out and making music together.
It's beautiful. There's one footage of your tune, Nathan, with Keith Carlick and Victor Krause, I think, and
Yeah.
you, and that's killing, man. It's like
that was actually the first gig I did after lockdown, after
really?
COVID lockdown.
Okay.
Yeah, like I hadn't played with other people in like 2 years or something until
wow.
that
Okay.
until that gig.
Wow, that sounds
Yeah,
beautiful.
it was like a good re-entry thing for me, you know.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mike, I want not to take too much of your time, but I just wanted to ask you about the, I didn't know about this record until like a month ago when we planned this interview, which is Canto, your solo guitar.
Oh yeah, that's the first record I ever made.
Yeah, and I was like, man, funny because now when we talk and you mentioned Derek Bailey before, and all these various guitarists, I was like, man, you sound like Bailey or someone like that on that record. You're Joe Morris, or investigating all these different approaches of the guitar, and like, how did that one happen? And do you still do that? I mean, like this kind of
Oh yeah,
solo guitar playing, or
yeah, I've got my chopstick right here that goes in
wow,
the string.
okay, yeah,
But Yeah, like Sonic Youth was a big influence on me too, and Thurston and Lee with the drumsticks under the strings, and putting a putting a drumstick and under my strings always like stressed me out. Like, man, this is gonna do some serious damage if I really lay into it. So I figured, well, what's a little thinner than a drumstick, but could still, and you can find these anywhere.
Exactly.
I've actually gone to gigs where I was like, oh, I forgot my chopstick. Does anybody in the audience have a chopstick? And there'll always be somebody like, I have chopsticks right here. Anyways, but yeah, so cantos, I think it's 10 or 11 prepared guitar improvised etudes, I call them. And this I recorded when I was kind of starting to get back into taking guitar more seriously after that sort of period of forcing myself to not play too much. And so I was living up in Western Mass, and I did this at a space up in Greenfield, Massachusetts. There was a place, actually it's still around, but it's in a different building. It's this place called Art Space. It's like a community arts center and music and arts kind of thing. Really cool people run it, and it's great for the hood and everything. But it used to be housed in this building that was like a little stone, like church, but it looks like a little castle. It's like on the corner in Greenfield. Yeah, really amazing little building, and they had this like spiral staircase, but they had an art gallery on the main floor. It was a really big, sort of open, tall ceiling wooden room, and I had known them. I started doing a little bit of teaching for them, and I asked them. I was like, I've been working with prepared guitar because I always listen to Derek Bailey and Frith and those guys, and for whatever reason, when I was trying to start playing again, I wanted to also approach the guitar playing it in a way that wasn't like that didn't have like the weight of like technical history, maybe, that like standard technique does. I don't think that's a good way to explain it, because there is actually a heavy history of like extended techniques and stuff.
But I know what you mean. Like,
I guess in my history, where I have a teacher saying, do this and don't do that, I didn't have a history of anybody saying like, okay, now if you're going to put a alligator clip on the guitar string, you should think about putting it between the second and third nodes of the, there wasn't that kind of like academia kind of
approach,
addled weight for me. So for me, it was like, oh, okay, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to figure out how to do it my way without anybody telling me anything about it. And it was kind of like that. So I was playing guitar a lot like that and showing different sounds and stuff. And I felt like, this could be kind of a cool thing to make. I'd never made a record under my own name. And I was like, maybe I'll just make this because it's what I'm working on. And I feel like this is important to me starting to play again, maybe. And so I asked the people at Art Space, I was like, can I come in here like at midnight when it's quiet outside and there's no one around and record this over the next couple of nights? And they were like, sure, here's the keys. Okay, great. Different world. And so I went up there for a couple of nights and got in at midnight, and I set up my mini disc recorder, and I had this little stereo mic, and I had this like sort of acousticy kind of plasticky kind of guitar that I didn't mind like messing up and putting stuff on, messing around with. And I would record a piece, and then I would realize that like the street cleaner would go by from like 1 to 3 a.m. up there. So I would just like kind of wait. Like you try to get it between street cleanings eventually. Because there'd be all this noise, and I think maybe it was like 3 nights or so I did that, 3 or 4 nights, and I got maybe 15 pieces, and I kind of went through, okay, I like this one, I don't like that one. I just went through the process of kind of producing the record, and I got it mastered, and there was a first copy that came out on my friend in New Jersey at the time. He had this sort of fake record label. I don't even remember the name of it, but it doesn't exist anymore. And anyways, it was just CDRs with like 8 inserts, which is actually really cool. So I think maybe we had like 20 of those, and I booked a little tour. I booked a five show tour in the Northeast. I played in Boston, Providence, and Northampton, Mass. And I played at CBGB when Depop was doing his series down there. and then there was one other gig, and it was my first tour. I didn't lose any money. I sold some records, but it was just me, and that was cool. That was another little like confidence boost,
Yeah.
And then I think all those had sold out eventually, all 20 of them. And then I wanted to have it available, so I had another like 300 made with different artwork.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, and they go slow, It's
Yeah,
usually
sure, but
sometimes now it's like people discover this thing like, whoa, I didn't know you did this. I have to get this
Yeah.
for my collection of items, But it is a really cool part of history, and I do still do a lot of extended technique stuff in my playing with different groups here and there. Not so much like so full on Derek Bailey
Yeah.
kind of thing, but I mean that's an important part of playing an instrument, like the sort of like proper schooling of it is not really as important, I think, as like the individual voice that everybody comes up with. And
Yeah.
to me, I don't care what that is, as long as it's not something that sounds like somebody else.
Oh man.
And that goes for everybody I hear. I don't want to hear anybody sounding like Bill Frisell,
Yeah.
or whoever.
Whoever. Yeah, we have a Frisell.
Mike Moreno, or whoever. It doesn't matter. Could go down the list. Everybody is their own person, and everybody has their own experiences. So everybody should have their own music. That's what I think.
Yeah, that's nicely put. Yeah. Michael, what are the plans for this year? For the remainder, are you preparing a new record, or writing some new music, or like what's on the schedule?
Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff actually. What is it? March.
Yeah.
Well, there's going to be the first thing coming up is a tour with a new band I'm in called Dumbass Youth, sort of a three-person co-op. What's so funny? This is a band actually with two people that live in Knoxville now. Steve Gigante, who's like a total genius word crafter, and he plays drums in this also, and a bassist named Evan Lipson. And it's kind of like I don't know what it is. It's kind of its own thing, but it's sort of like these improvised pieces with words, and it's really a lot of fun. We made a record right before I moved from Knoxville, so that record's coming out next month on the Stripe Light Records label, and we have a 17-day East Coast tour.
Oh wow, beautiful.
Yeah, April 27 to March 13. We're playing at New Blue in New York, actually.
Oh wow.
With Elliot Sharp, and Mike Pride has a band on that gig too. But yeah, so that's the next thing. And then I made a duo record with Victor Krauss that was actually the second thing I did right after lockdown. It was actually from that video you saw where we played with Keith and Jeff. We also did like some rehearsals for that record around then, and then maybe we actually recorded it that weekend too. And that's coming out on the Destiny Records label at some point. Yeah, there's been like some manufacturing, so seemingly it's taken forever, but you know what they say about things worth waiting for. So hopefully this year we'll find something out about it. And then there's a new MSSV record, my band with Mike Watt and Stephen Hodges. We recorded this record right after our tour last spring, the Haru Tour 22, where we did 48 shows in 48 days, and we made the record on days 49 and 50. And that record is coming out this fall. And there's no one knows about this yet, but I'll give you the scoop that we're going to do another US tour this fall for that record. So.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, and then there's probably a couple other things I'm forgetting, but
yeah, well, that's a lot already. I mean, wow, fantastic.
I'm starting to play more solo gigs too. I was kind of shied away from playing solo shows because I really like playing with other people. But it's funny talking about like this idea of the music that you make from yourself. The more I kind of explore that, the more I kind of thought like, oh, there is sort of a way that I could do a concert of just me doing some of this stuff that could be interesting. So I've started doing that. I kind of did the first one down here last week, and I had a good time, and I thought it was kind of in line with what I was going for. So I'm encouraged by that too. So there'll be
Yeah.
some more there down the line.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Man, I'll have to follow when the records come out and check them out. So beautiful.
Thanks.
Man, I hope you'll come to Europe one day. It would be nice to see you here. Play gigs
Yeah, I'd love
whatever,
to.
or you
Get
know.
us a gig. We'll come.
Yeah, exactly. What's the fee?
It's not hard.
I know, yeah, I know how it
You
goes.
just need a gig.
It's true, actually, yeah. But yeah, but cool, man. I mean, appreciate for sharing some of these thoughts.
Yeah. Thank you for asking and for talking to me.
You know.